Welcome to BFC Live, the daily video and podcast series of Business of Cannabis. BFC Live highlights the companies, brands, people, and trends driving the global cannabis sector. Find out all that we do at businessofcannabis.com. Coming up on BFC Live, we connect with Nalin Thillanayagam from CannDelta. We want to connect with him about the Canadian cannabis supply chain, how it's evening out, where the challenges have been, what kind of cannabis people are buying, and how they're buying it. This is Nalin Thillanayagam from CannDelta. Nalin, thanks for being here.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Jay. Always a pleasure.
Well, I like obviously connecting with the CannDelta team. You're great partners of ours, but also I feel like every time that we do it, I get smarter, and I have a feeling today will be no different. You had said before we came on that we want to talk about some of your observations that you're seeing, both. I think it's sort of throughout the supply chain in Canadian cannabis. Where should we start?
I think in this case, we'll start just by going over what our supply chain looks like in Canada, and then just talking about the different licenses. And then I'll just get into just my observations based off of some Health Canada data, and then just some other news articles and OCS data that I've looked at.
Love it, because I have, especially starting with the supply chain, I feel like people think someone grows it, then it gets to store, but it is this robust, lots of steps along the way. And so let's walk us through.
Okay, yeah. So if you see the graphic supplied by Health Canada, it just shows the different types of licenses and just what the process is kind of like for how to sell and who you can really sell to. So first step is obviously you have to cultivate the cannabis. So there's two licenses that help with that. So it's either a standard or a micro cultivation license. You could also throw nursery into this as well, because it's the growing of starting material, and you can also get seeds and seedlings and clones. You can also throw industrial hemp license into that as well. Same kind of cultivation, except you just have a strict, I guess you could say, measurement of the THC content has to be less than 0.3%. And anybody who has these licenses can sell to other cultivators, other processors, or anybody authorized to do any kind of research. So that would be analytical testing or research license. The second step would be the processing of cannabis. So now we're talking about either standard or micro processing licenses. Anybody who has these licenses can sell to, again, other cultivators, other processors. Anybody that has a federal sales license, so medical license holders. And then in some places you can send this to a province and territories as with authorized sellers. So it's OCS or LCRB. And then again, more authorized research is allowed within this step. And then the last step is selling to the public. So the two classes that sort this out are federal sales license in the medical space. So that's selling tested, labeled, and packaged cannabis products. You can either do it by phone, online, or secured home delivery, but it can only be sold to registered personnel. So anybody who registers within the site and works with that program. And then the other would be authorized and provincial territorial sales. So that's selling the same deal. It's tested, labeled, and packaged cannabis at the discretion of individual provinces and territories, because they're the ones who make up the rules on how their province will gain access to cannabis.
There's a lot of those people. I remember early days there was not that many of the cultivators or the processors, and now there's so many with different sort of not patchwork of licenses, but different kinds of licenses and working within among themselves. And many of those licensees you'll never hear about because they're not publicly facing, but they are sort of integral parts of the supply chain, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a really big spider web just working all together, just so it, I guess you could say, runs smoothly, but at the same time doesn't really phase out. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And I guess love to sort of get your thoughts, sort of where, like how that plays out in the world, like where, like who's growing, what's selling, like all those things. You have some stuff for us on that front?
Yeah, so I just wanted to talk about, again, just some observations that I had myself. Just looking at some of Health Canada's, I guess you could say, metrics on the dried flower production and the vegetative plants. So the first graph you'll see is for dried flower, and I just took a snapshot between March 2020 and March 2021. So it's a couple months ago. Mm-hmm. Again, you can see from the graph that the amount of unpackaged product kind of increases by a fair amount, even into this year, March 2021. The difference between March 2020 and March 2021, it's about 400 kilograms, or sorry, 400,000 kilograms. So it's 400 tons of excess unpackaged and inventory. So I guess just to give more of an explanation on that. So Health Canada defines unfinished inventory as the amount of cannabis held in stock by a cultivator or a LP that's not packaged, it's not labeled, and it's not ready for sale.
It's sitting around.
Exactly, it's just sitting around. And then finished inventory is product that's ready for sale and is held in the warehouses of provincial wholesalers and licensed producers. So we can see from this graph that between March 2020 and March 2021, it's about 563,000 kilograms, increasing all the way up until 954,000 kilograms. So in that 1 year alone, we're looking at about 400 tons of excess dried flower. Yeah, exactly.
A lot of weed sitting around.
That's a lot of weed, man. It's a lot of, well, you could also say it's a lot of money too, right?
Yes.
It's a lot of time and labor.
Yes.
I don't want to say lost, but it's kind of like a sunken cost at that point.
Misallocated, yeah.
Yeah. And then if you look at the package inventory column, it's only about 390,000 compared to in March 2020 compared to March 2021, where it only goes for 73,000 kilos.
Right.
For all, and we're talking about federal license holders throughout the country. Yeah, so it's very difficult to see that number, at least for me anyways. It's kind of choking, because it means like where is the issue really, right? Where is that really standing?
Right.
And again, if you look at the vegetative cannabis plant slide, or the graph, sorry,
yeah,
we actually kind of see that the unpackaged inventory decreases. So it started off in March 2020 at like 2.9 mil, and it's dropped to about 2.6. So it's pretty good. It's about 300,000 of packaged units, not kilograms, that have successfully been sold or used. So if you compare these two numbers, it's, at least with the package production column, March 2020, we only have about 6,000 packaged units of vegetative cannabis. And in March 2021, it's only about 148. So again, very, very, very big drop. And it's for me just right now, it's trying to understand where, like, why is that happening and where is it happening? So it kind of gets into my next point, which is, why is there so much excess flower? Like, why is there so much excess flower? And can we discuss some potential, I guess, causes for this excess? So I guess you could say that although potency and THC percentage is probably an issue, I guess, with the current dried flower market, I get the overarching theme to this question is just poor, mediocre quality of dried flower, especially on the early days of the market, where compared to now, it's been ramped up a fair amount. Customers are also being more sophisticated. Some people are actually turning to more higher quality craft cannabis with more interesting terpene profiles, as explained on LP's website, where you can actually go visit and see how it's being grown, what flavors they're really targeting towards, and just getting an overall look at what the end product is, what the end goal is. And then the awareness of CBD and other compounds are becoming another key decision maker for most consumers, because for anybody new entering the space, I feel like THC percentage and just that number in general is just a little daunting to look at. So maybe for them, at least using CBD as a more, I guess you could say, health and wellness approach, which is a lot more easier to consume. We also have we can also add to this issue with poor market forecasting, just very inadequate market research, very lax production practices, which all in turn trigger a multitude of regulatory issues as well. So the way an LP runs their business is a potential for a supply chain. Again, just from what I've shown you guys so far, I'm inferring that an LP kind of treats cannabis as a commodity rather than a tailored product, sort of a grow it and they'll come kind of model. Mm-hmm. But apart from misjudging the demand, so the type and the volume, you can also see some of the issues, some other issues such as constrained distributions, especially in Ontario, which I will discuss in a little bit. Mm-hmm. And again, so that looking at that figure again, like 400 tons of dried flower, it says a lot without having to say a lot.
Right.
I think the product, I believe product might have been sitting on shelf for a fair amount of time while it's becoming stale. And then at that point, distribution was also pinched, especially in the early days of cannabis legalization in the country. Average shelf life for cannabis, at least for storing it in ideal conditions, would be in a dark room, and you keep it at room temp. It's pretty simple. And you can get to about 1 to 2 years, and it's not that it won't dry out, it'll take longer to dry out. Most retail stores don't do this. I've personally never walked into a retail store where they have a dark space. It's usually either in a locked in the back with lights on, so you can see what product you're working with.
Right.
And we can assume in that case that the shelf life would decrease by a fair amount.
And with they would also argue that they have to get it like they're the end of the supply chain, not the beginning, right? So
No,
they have to
exactly.
like leave the producer, get to the provincial authorities, get to them, and like I mean, retailers are trying to manage their inventory, obviously, but they can only manage what they get.
No, exactly, right. And again, volatility in the sector kind of also means a lot of turnover and instabilities in the LP. It also contributes to undisciplined operations. And then having a shelf life in general, just having shelf life on a product just tends to accentuate errors as the inventory loses freshness and value.
Yeah, totally.
So again, just looking at other forms of Health Canada data, just on my research alone and multiple news articles, you can see that Health Canada standards, well, products that fail to meet Health Canada standards that can't be sold or used as biomass, there's only one option for them. You got to destroy it at that point. So since 2018, we can estimate that there's over 500 tons of unpackaged cannabis that had to get destroyed since 2018. And if we look at 2019 to 2020, we can see that almost 6 million packages of cannabis products were destroyed. Half of that, so about 3.7 million packaged dried cannabis products destroyed. And then the other fraction of that would be distributed between extracts, edibles, and topicals, with extracts at 1.5, the edibles at 700K, and then topicals at about 943 packages. So again, it's a lot of cannabis. That's a lot of weed that's getting burned.
A lot of waste. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So as you were mentioning earlier about the retail stores and how they are the last in line for the supply chain, it is a factor to look into for our cannabis supply chain. Again, if you look at the beginning of legalization till now in Ontario specifically, I'll talk about Ontario specifically for this portion. Ontario has a population of about 13.5 million, and that's over a third of the country's total population. So if you look at the OCS Insights report for the 2019-2020 year, we see the total number of stores for that portion, at least the reported portion, is only 53 stores.
Right.
Okay. And then as of now, when you look on the AGCO portal and like you filter it to show the authorized stores to open, it's about 1,076 in the province, which is like 950 store plus in that at least 1 year time span, right? And even in that situation, there is a little bit of a distribution gap here, right? So even in our city, in the GTA area, if you take into the opted municipalities, for example, Mississauga, Vaughan, Markham, it's about 1.5 million people that cannot be serviced by cannabis. They cannot be serviced by AGCO because the municipalities have opted out. So anybody that lives in those boroughs, they will have to travel, spend more money on gas,
right,
go to indulge, right, and to get the product that they want. And we're talking about, at least to help ease the pain for supply chain, if you could open up these municipalities, we could definitely see a drop in that excess flower. And then we also see that customers show, I guess you could say, a marked preference for buying in store versus buying online. Because I mean, I would like to go see and talk to somebody who knows about weed, especially when I like to purchase something and I'd like to ask questions just off the bat. Maybe there's something new that I haven't really tried, and a bud tender can give me some more insight, right? We can see from the OCS Insights report that sales velocity by THC and sales for the new product category charts, more sales for new products are generated in a retail store versus onto the OCS itself, the OCS website. The sales velocity for products on over 28% THC is 344 times the amount sold on the OCS.
Right.
And it's about 199 times on the OCS. So it's almost double the amount that you're getting from in-store versus online. So another aspect that we could talk about in this situation would be the jump in the number of producers in this past 2 years, because that could also lead to a bottleneck into the supply chain. So again, just looking at more Health Canada data and StatsCan data, at the beginning of legalization, there's about 132 LPs listed, and then of those 132, about 32 of them have a sales amendment, which would have allowed them to sell, straight product to a retailer. Compared to now, when we take a look at it, it's over 600 LPs,
Right.
and at least over half of them have sales amendment. So that's over 6 million people. That's over at least 300 LPs that could sell straight to a retailer or a retail distributor. And then if we dial it down a little bit and we take a look at how much product is actually sold, at least you could say, there's about 9 million package units of cannabis extracts that's shown, but only about only about 1 million of the package units that are actually being sold to a retailer. So 9 million made and only 1 million being sold.
Another
right?
big gap between produced and and distributed.
Exactly. So you can kind of see that all of these issues are very interconnected, and with past errors and developments lingering in the supply chain, it kind of makes the product stranded, and it also loses, the main thing is that it loses value.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, and I wonder every year that we have this conversation in September, let's say, like, will these things, right size? Meaning, like, there'll be at some point, there'll be a steady state of numbers of retail stores in Canada. There will be a number of consumers who are buying in the legal market. We'll know relatively what they're buying. There'll always be new products, but at some point it'll be like, beer, for example, right? Like, beer companies, beer producers know roughly what people are going to be buying. Stores know roughly what kind of beer and what quantities people are going to be buying because they have 20, 40, 60, 100 years of data. We have since 2018, right? We barely have any. And so I just wonder if, like, at some point we will, all the graphs will come, the supply and demand will marry up, and that'll be great for consumers. It'll be great for businesses. It'll be great for the provincial authorities. We're just not there yet, obviously.
Exactly. I think really the larger point in this is that it's a very new industry. Everybody's still trying to figure it out in some way or form. And the volatility that you can see expressed, like, a lot of it is based off of very minor things for some people, I guess you could say, in the first half of the supply chain, in the cultivation processing side, whereas compared to the retailer side. So that could include like management turnover, like overbuilding of facilities, and like other things that are not necessarily conducive to a stable operating environment that may be affecting our supply chain.
Yeah. No, there's a lot there. And one of the other points, I think, is how people want to be buying it on the tail end of the supply chain, because all the numbers you just showed between what people are buying online at OCS and what people are buying in store, I mean, people are heavily favoring in store, obviously. And I just, the numbers don't lie. Like, people want to be in store. And that's true in other provinces too. And I just think I think the conversation is heading to, like, what is the role of provincial authorities in this process, outside of like Quebec and the provincially owned ones? Like, what is the role of the wholesaler? Is it to be selling directly to consumers, or is it to be a great wholesaler?
No, exactly. I think in this point, it's just to see that how can it, like, I think with most LPs, I think just customer feedback is like a really big thing, right? Like, are your consumers liking your product? Do they want to see more? Do they want to see less? Do they want to see something different? Right? I think key feedback like that will really help in the long run. I guess that you could say the same for retailers as well. Like, talk to your MPs, talk to the people in your opted out municipalities, see if they would be interested at all into allowing for more stores to be open, just so we can help give accessibility to people that need to leave that borough to go service themselves elsewhere.
People want to buy cannabis. That is like, for all these numbers suggest that that is the case. It's
Exactly.
everything in the back end, getting the supply chain there is really where we're all focused in this conversation has been.
For sure. And I think the one thing that at least that us at the CannDelta team can do to help would probably be to just, well, I guess you could help you be a more informed business owner versus somebody who's just like, I guess, who just wants to be there, who just wants to, they don't want the fear of missing out.
Yeah.
So I guess if somebody was interested in pursuing any of these federal Health Canada licenses, or possibly even a retail license throughout the country, I know that we would be able to help a lot. We would be able to assist a lot. In the retail space, at least from what we've seen with our clients, we can help make sure that you guys are placed on a path of success. We could obviously help you scout good locations, obtaining licenses in a timely way, just sharpening your management overall. And that would include inventory management. So how to use inventory versus storing it, and customer expression so that the product is not lingering on shelves or growing stale. We can also help calculate the amount of money that a business owner should allocate for initial inventory purchases. So when you first open your store, you have to make that first purchase with the OCS, at least in Ontario. And at least from what we've seen, we have collected a fair amount of consumer data, and that we can see that it's necessary to invest a fair bit because it's your first initial order, but following the OCS's guidelines is the best way to run your business. And OCS recommends only putting at least 10 to 15 days worth of product as your first purchase order at least, and then just riding the wave and then seeing what your consumer base is like in the location you selected. Yeah. Which all tie into how well your store runs.
Yeah, because you don't want to be drowned by your first order for the rest of your life. And I think that, right, it's been really hard because certainly early days with the retailers, they only had very limited number of SKUs to buy, so everybody had the same SKUs. Now, whereas, as you sort of talked about, we're not that place. This has been super informative, like thinking about the whole picture, drilling down to product, where people are getting it, how they're getting it. And I think importantly, and not to sort of tout you guys, but the CannDelta team really has a purview of sort of all of this, and both can save a bunch of money if you're starting up, but also really help you hone what exactly you're doing, both from cultivation all the way through to retail. So I appreciate the team. I appreciate learning every week sort of what you guys are up to. So Nalin, thanks for being here today, and we look forward to connecting with you down the road.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jay. Again, always a pleasure to talk to you, man. It's nice to be here.
It's been good fun. The beard looks good too.
Oh, you too, man. Thanks.
All right, thanks.
That was Nalin Thillanayagam from CannDelta. If you like this program, please rate and review us wherever you heard the podcast. It helps support the work we do. We're able to do what we do because of our ongoing partners, including Alterna Savings, Cannabis at Work, Cannabis Benchmarks, CannDelta, Gallagher, Headset, and Torque & Mains. Find out all that we do at businessofcannabis.com.